Good morning, G-Free. Oh, it's a peppy bunch today. That's what I said. You guys are clapping and everything. This is fantastic. All right, so where are we going to start today? We're going to start like everybody else has, right? Happy Father's Day, okay? So, to all the fathers, raise your hands if you're a father. All right, Happy Father's Day. All right, everybody clap. All right, they're clapping, okay. Okay, stop. How about all the guys that maybe don't have kids, or you have, but you've been a coach, a mentor, a teacher, a pastor, a policeman, a fireman, any of the above? Anybody have been any of that? All right, so yay! Okay. Happy Father's Day. Now, one more. To all of those women and moms that are out there that have stepped in time and time again to fulfill that role of a father throughout their lives, sometimes just because dad's away, but other times because dad wasn't in the picture, or heaven forbid, maybe even dad passed away. Do we have any moms out there that have done that role? There we go. All right, thank you. So, I got to be honest. Father's Day for me is just it's a little uncomfortable. It's a little complicated. I have a complicated relationship with Father's Day. Now, Mother's Day, it always makes me sad, and that's because all of my moms, outside of my lovely wife, who's a mom to our children, all of my moms in my life have passed away. And I miss them, and I love them, but I've got great memories, and it's sad, but it's also rewarding because I remember all those great times. But Father's Day is just a rough day for me. So I'm going to tell you a little story. So that's right. If those remember, you got story time with Bob. Okay? Now, for some reason, Noel, I don't know why. Every time I do story time is the week Noel's not here, and when I do, anyways. So he's going to miss it. It actually is going to be more story time with Bobby, as you can tell by the picture. As me in fourth grade, you can tell by the lovely 70s backdrop of the autumn leaves. That's how they were doing it. I think it's Harvest Gold or something they would talk about back in the day. Now, I'm going to tell you a story, and it is a slightly emotional story, but I need to tell you in advance. It's okay to laugh, because I'm going to laugh, because some of the stuff I'm going to say, well, it's kind of an awkward story. It's funny, so just know that coming into it. So, I was, as you could tell by this lovely picture of me, thank you, Elaine, my wife for dragging out those pictures last night. I was kind of a go-with-the-flow kid, right? I didn't have too many worries. I was kind of, I'd say space cadet many times. When I was really young, I just didn't have a father. And what I mean by that is, like, other people had fathers, and I had aunts and uncles, and my cousins all had fathers, but I just didn't have one. And it wasn't a thing. It was just, I just didn't have one. Okay, whatever. I just kind of moved on with things. And honestly, as I got older and I started going, other people have this. When I started asking little questions, it became quite obvious in the household that nobody really welcomed questions on that front. That was not something we discussed, and I should just keep it to myself. And I'm like, all right, whatever. I'll roll with it, right? Not a big deal. Now, unfortunately, things got a little bit more complicated, probably second or third grade. You start getting into those grades. They do better with this now, but back then it was the end of the school year and Father's Day was coming up, and they said, hey, we're all going to write stories about your fathers, okay? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to write. So I'm like, my granddad, we live with my grandparents, my grandfather, he watched a lot of, like war movies, like stuff. So I'm like, man, my dad was a soldier. Yeah, that's it. He went away to war, and he got blown up or something, and he just never came back. So I wrote that, turned it in. The teacher's like, yeah, whatever. And he gave me a B or whatever and turned it back in. I'm like, yeah, okay, pass. That's no big deal. Nothing to talk about here, right? A couple more years pass. All right, now they're doing, okay, so now, and everybody does this, right? The family genealogy. What does your last name mean, and where does it come from? All right? Now, I knew my mom and I, Selfridge is our last name, and I knew that we had a different last name than everybody else in the family. But that's kind of all I knew, because we didn't talk about it. So my grandfather, notice how he watched a lot of TV. So my grandfather watched a lot of, like, the cowboys and Indians movies where they'd shoot each other and stuff. And, in the movies, there was always, like, these Native Americans, like, Steep Mountain and Silent Crow and, Giant Tree and stuff like that. And I got a really dark tan in the summer, so I'm like, hey, maybe I'm a Native American, So I write this big story about how some great-great-great-great-grandfather, I had a good imagination, great-great-grandfather was a Native American, And one day, there was a big fight between the Cowboys and the Indians, and he took a giant mountain ridge, ready, all by himself, and somehow that became taking of a ridge, self-ridge. And I was all proud of myself. Look, hey, that's a great story. So my mom got called, thinking I was just being sarcastic. Turns out Selfridge is a very common English name. They actually have like a store like Walmart's over there called the Selfridge store, the Selfridges. It's like a store, and no. And she said, look, we'll talk about it, but just don't do that again, right? Okay. So I'm like, all right, we'll get to it, but it's still a little uncomfortable. So I'm 12 years old. It's kind of closing things up here. I'm 12 years old. I'm at the Clearfield Community Pool, right? And this little chubby kid comes up to me, and he goes, hi, Bobby, because everybody called me Bobby. I went, hi. I said, who are you? And he says, I'm your brother. I said, Mom, it's time we had a talk. So turns out we sat down. My dad was 16. My mom was 15 when they had me. He was a high school student, obviously a new father. He was also a drug addict, very emotionally messed up, a very abusive person. And eventually, when I was a little baby, he left for the West Coast, California area. Now, not before he met yet another teenage girl and had me a little brother as well. So he grew up in the area, so if anybody in the area knows some other Selfridges, we probably are related. So I wonder what cool stories he got to make up, right? We should compare notes. So my father then lived the rest of his life bouncing in and out of jail. But look, many of you are going to have a lot of crazy stories, right, as well. Some of you have very calm stories. Mom and dad had me. We grew up with brothers and sisters, and yay, everybody's good. But many of you are also going to have crazy or crazier stories than that. I don't tell you this for any kind of pity, but because this command from God that we're given, honor mother and father, sometimes it's not very simple for us, is it? And maybe it's not been that simple for you. You see, from the time we're born, we enter, whether we like it or not, we enter in a whole bunch of relationships around us. And those relationships, they change us as people. First, we're born and we're children and we're in the care of our parents. Whether we like them or not, it doesn't matter, we're under their care. Then many of us become parents ourselves, and we got to figure out how to be better or as good of parents as ours were. And then eventually we're parents of adults, who is rather complex, as I have my adult daughter sitting out here today. So then we become caretakers of our parents, and some of us are lucky enough to have adult children at the same time as we're taking care of our parents. And eventually, we all end up needing care ourselves, right, from those that we cared for. This cycle is a natural cycle of life, and it's designed by God, and it's deeply human, right? It's imperfect, broken many times. Paul said, or as we see in our, Paul did not say this, by the way. Paul's in the New Testament. This is a little bit older than that in Exodus. The commandment we're talking about today is honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord that your God has given you. It's not just about being nice to mom and dad, right? This is about a command that's supposed to tie us all together as many, many generations. Right? That's the point of this. So what do we mean by honor here, right? Honor can have lots of different words. Well, first we're going to talk about kabed. Kabed is the Hebrew word that means honor, which more literally translated is to make heavy or give weight to, right? When we talk about honoring our parents and honoring someone, this is something we are not to take lightly. This is something that is serious. This is something that, whether it's good or it's bad, it's going to weigh on us, right? It's heavy. And we need to look at it as that, regardless of how we feel, regardless of whether our parents were great, slightly imperfect, or just downright horrible parents. So honor kind of comes down to lots of different forms. We're going to focus on 3 of them here today. And to simplify this, I'm going to label them image, authority, and legacy. The first we're going to talk about today is image. Image is we need to honor everyone. Absolutely everyone. Why? Because we are all made in God's image. Paul writes in Romans 2 or 12:10 to be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above ourselves. See, every person is made in the image of God. We don't honor people because they earn it or they deserve it. We honor people because they're created by God. And every living thing that's around us that ever has been and ever will be has been created by God. This is the foundation of what Jesus taught us as Christian love, right? It applies across the board. It doesn't matter whether what your gender is or your race is or your ethnicity is or, quite honestly, what your character is. Even if you're a horrible person, you're still created by God and loved by God. So we honor each other across the board because every single person has value as a creation of the Father. The next one is we need to honor authority, right? So what does that mean? Honor those in authority. God created and designed order for us, and he allows those that are in authority to be in that role of authority over us. So to kind of clear this up a little bit, Paul tells us in Romans 13, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority, there is no one, except that for which God has established. Meaning, God allows everybody who are in positions of authority to be in those roles of authority. If he doesn't want them there, they're not going to be there. When it's time for them to go, they're going to go. Okay? And we are to worship, listen to me, honor those people in authority. Now, these are our teachers and our police officers and pastors and obviously our parents when we're young in particular, right? Until we turn 18 and then we get all spicy and say, you can't tell me what to do. I'm 19 now. Now, the reality is many of us probably have a knee-jerk reaction to this, right? You thought something in the back of your head when I say about these people in authority and we need to honor those positions. We've all seen people in positions of authority who misuse that authority. Paul's not saying that we honor authorities who act right. He's saying that their position has weight to it. It is it's a serious thing. The position that people in authority have are what's important. And that was what God structured and designed. Our churches are designed this way through all the different, like Free Methodist churches, Baptist churches, United Catholic churches, right? Our country is set up that way, was set up by godly men who said, hey, we should have some structure to this. And that position has a weight and it has importance. We may not agree with those people that are in authority, but we are to honor the position that they're in. There's a great example of this in the Bible where David was being hunted by King Saul. You see, here's where we got to have fun. I got to go to some kids' books and find some pretty pictures. So there was King Saul. He was the first king of Israel, okay? And he was a good guy. The Lord said, you are my man. You are the king of Israel. And he was good until he decided not to be good. And he started turning away from God and doing a bunch of things he shouldn't be doing. Meanwhile, David, who was one of Saul's servants / soldiers / warriors, right, was very loyal to Saul. But God decided, Saul's kind of going the wrong way. David, you going to be my guy up next. I know you're shocked by this, but the current king was not so happy when he heard there was going to be a new king and it wasn't him. Okay, so what he did is he said, okay, that's it. We need to axe David, right? He sent his people after David. He was trying to kill David. And fortunately, though, for Saul, David was a more honorable person than he was. David found Saul in several vulnerable positions. Several times throughout this story, David finds him sleeping, sneaks up on him in a cave. You see that picture? He's ready to shiv him in the back there. But David said to his men, he said, the Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master that is the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is anointed by the Lord. He is appointed by the Lord. He was put in that position by the Lord, and David realized it just wasn't his time yet. So he chose to honor his old master, even though his old master in Saul was not honoring him. It shows us that honor isn't about a single person or an individual in their character. It's all about God. It's about us showing how God's design for putting people in these roles of authority, even though we don't agree with or we don't like, may not deserve our honor, but the positions that they're in do. What about us, though, when we talk about these people? We can, or we like them, or we don't like them. So these are just people put there. And then the other people God created, right? We had nothing to do with that. So what can we do? What honor can we provide? What is the active thing that we can do to take part in this structure? And that's where this through legacy comes from. So we need to create and provide honor through legacy. And it begins with us individually. Paul tells us in Ephesians that fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So I'm going to do a Bob paraphrase here. Parents, do not anger, irritate, annoy, enrage, incense, infuriate, bother, nag your kids. Teach them to love God and love people. This is really the only type of honor that we have direct control over, right? Like, we are to honor other people, but we are by respecting and honoring and loving our children, when we love them well, when we treat them with kindness, humility, and we do that consistently, we build a foundation so that they learn how to honor and respect us in the future and honor God as well. The reality is, honor comes from honor, right? When we honor our children and we treat them respectfully, it returns honor and respect back to us. That love that we provide for them builds our legacy, not just to our children, but then our children's children, and our children's children's children. And like my super great grandfather, who was the Native American that took the ridge. So we say all of that, and I think most of us here, because we're here, would agree with that. That's how we try to be as parents. That's also how we try to be now as children. But what about those of us that... What if our parents didn't act honorably? What if they didn't respect us? What if they're people that caused us a pain or even abused us? First and foremost, I want to make sure it's very clear here today. Honor does not mean allowing abuse or evil to occur. Honor does not require us, it doesn't require us to be emotionally or relationally close with somebody who's toxic, abusive, dangerous, or downright evil in some cases. It does not mean that we are to remain silent when they're doing wrong things to other people. It does not mean we sit by and allow them to continue to do bad things to other people. It does mean, though, that you have value. We've been talking about this, the very first one, right? Everybody has value because we're all created by God. You were created by God. You have value. Therefore, it's not okay to be treated as somebody without honor. You deserve respect and honor yourself as a creation of God. The next piece is honor in action. So we show honor through our actions, whether even during brokenness, even during broken relationships and closed off relationships. One of the ways we could do this is by trying to provide care for those people, maybe those that didn't even care for us, right? Now, we can't necessarily do that directly in some cases, because as we noted, sometimes you can't have that relationship. You have to set up that boundary. So maybe you get a third person involved to make sure they're okay. Maybe you get them medical attention, and then you step back again. Honoring a bad parent has lots of different ways. You can look at that. You can pray for them, right? We're to pray for our enemies even. We can pray for them. We can refuse to return the wrong onto them that we have had wrongs onto us. Just stop it right there. We can set healthy boundaries, but still refuse to slander or gossip about them publicly, right? We say, look, I'm not going to have this relationship because it's not healthy, but I'm not going to sit out here and badmouth you to everybody I can find either. It's about trying to help hope they're seeking redemption through God and not just getting revenge on earth here, right? So kind of just a quick side note on this story. I told you about my father early on. Over the course of my life, I spent 6 days, got 2 letters, and had 1 phone call with my father over my 40 years or whatever it was when he passed away. So a couple years ago, my half-brother, that chubby little kid that came up and said, "Hi, Bobby," he called me, and he said, "Hey, just to let you know, I hear our dad's dead." And I went, "Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know." And a short time later, I got a phone call. It was a California phone number, and it just said coroner. So I picked it up, and it was indeed the coroner. My father had died. He was in a drug house with a bunch of other people. The coroner was proud to tell me, I think it was some sort of consolation, that my father had died of natural causes due to cancer, and it was the first time ever the coroner had been called to that neighborhood that wasn't, somebody being shot, stabbed, died of a drug overdose, whatever. He just died of natural causes. So he was like, "Hey, just so you know." I said, "Gee, thanks." I mean, that is some consolation. I decided my way of honoring him, because the coroner said, "I've spent a week," my father had passed away a week earlier, "I spent a week trying to get a hold of somebody to figure out what to do with this body. I've called aunts, uncles, his own brother wouldn't answer any voicemails or phone calls, because that's who my father was." So in that moment, I decided my way of honoring him was to make sure that he made it into a burial plot. He got a marker on the plot, and I know that he's buried somewhere in a cemetery in Bakersfield, California. And someday I hope to get out there and visit that graveside and close things up with my dad. But that's how I honored him, and I pray that was right with God and I did the right things, right? I answered the phone, right? And I did the paperwork. That sounds silly, but so we seek to forgive wrongs that are committed against us, and we try to bring all of those wrongs that we've had over the years, and we try to lay that at the foot of the cross. But I also know the reality is, regardless of who it was in those positions of authority, or your parents, or your mentors, or a coach who may have wronged you, or somebody randomly that has wronged you, sometimes we may not reconcile or fix those relationships before we pass or they pass. But what we want to do is try to every day get to that point of laying that at the foot of Jesus and allow him to help us work through that, right? It's not going to be a quick process. It's not going to be an easy process. And sometimes it takes a very, very long time. And that's okay. The last piece I'll talk to you about is find what can be honored. Just a funny one, Dave Caslow, one of our members of a church, he's been a coach forever, and he just happens to have known my younger brother, and he knew my father, and we talked after church this morning, so the first service didn't get this. So one of the things I got from my father, I loved my mom. She was a great woman, but she wasn't that funny. She was always pretty serious, okay? My father was not, and I know he was not, because not once but twice I saw accidents or whatever, and I talked to police officers, and they're like, "Bob Selfridge, was your dad Bob Selfridge?" I say, "Yeah, I arrested him once, and he was a hoot." Even the cops liked the guy when they were arresting him, right? So I got that, and as did my brother. He also got that kind of charisma and that humor from him, okay? My athletic ability I got from him. And even if you don't have that, now, you clearly missed a few weeks ago when there was a picture of me in high school. I didn't look like this in high school. I didn't think that was funny for service. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Yes. These are the jokes, folks. Yeah. So you find what you can to honor your parents through. Maybe just simply because they were part of the creation of you. Right? You're here because of them. Why does this all matter? Why does this commandment matter? God ties this directly to our longevity and blessings on earth and a promise, right? Several people, when I say this is what I'm preaching on, they're like, as soon as I say honor your father and mother, including my wife, that's the only one with a promise. You know that, right? And everybody's like very excited about that. It must have been a Bible school thing that I missed when I was a kid. But it is. It's the only commandment that God's giving you a promise there. Why does he make it so important to say you will be blessed in this land by your God? if you honor your father and mother. Well, a big part of that is because when we have a breakdown of honor in these systems in our culture, it breaks down our relationships. It breaks down our communities. What happens if children just decide, listen to this, what happens when children don't honor their parents? What happens when citizens don't honor the authorities? What if people don't honor one another? The result being lawlessness, pain, chaos, and brokenness. And I know a bunch of you are going, yep, yesterday was the day. We had protests everywhere. We had marches everywhere. We had anti-protests. And we're in a bad spot right now because, let's frankly note it, many of us don't respect one another. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, right? Those people, whatever those people are, those people just don't get it. We lost respect, and we've lost the honor we have for other God's creation, and we've lost respect, and we've lost for those that are in authority. And again, on both sides of the political world that we live on. And maybe we need to work on that. Because otherwise, the result's lawlessness, pain, brokenness. When we live out our lives as God intends for us, not just with this commandment, but with all of them, showing value to every person, we respect those roles in authority, even if we don't like the people in them at the moment, and actively love one another, our communities can thrive the way God intends it. And I kind of see that here. It's been, when we come here, we feel that love, we feel those hugs, we feel that moment where we feel comfortable. And it's because we're in that kind of environment. What if the whole world was like that? Wouldn't that be great? The reality is we can't rewrite our past. Either what we've done as those authority people or the parents, or what happened to us as kids or those that were under authorities. But we can kind of find ways to shape what's coming next. We can do that by how we honor people, how we love one another, and how we lead others here today. And you can start that with where you're at right now, right? With the people that God has placed in your lives, whether it be your kids, your spouse, your parents, your coworkers, your employees, your bosses, all of those. That's how we can do that. Let's pray together. Lord, help us to live lives of honor. Not because you commanded it, but to reflect your character through us to the world. Teach us, God, to respect every person as one of your special creations. To submit to authority with peace and grace, and to raise up those in our care with love, truth, and the grace of Jesus Christ. Where there's brokenness, bring healing. Where there's bitterness, bring peace. Let us be people who pass on honor from generation to generation to generation. In Jesus' great and holy name, amen.